season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
Welcome to the Vancouver International Boat Show virtual seminar series, sponsored by Freedom Marine International Yacht Sales, the premier choice for exploring the passion of yachting. Thank you for joining us. The seminar will begin in one moment. If you are having technical difficulties, you can reach me, the online moderator, via the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. Questions for the speaker can be added to the Q&A box, also at the bottom of your screen. I will ask these at the end of the presentation. Now it is our pleasure to present Sharing the Strait with Orcas with Michelle Young, CNBC. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Braden, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Like Braden said, I am Michelle Young with Georgia Strait Alliance's Clean Marine BC program, and I'm really happy to talk to you about sharing the coast with whales, which is a privilege we really do enjoy here in British Columbia. And unfortunately, I'm not coming to you from a seminar room in BC Place, and instead I'm coming to you from Gabriola Island, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Snuneymuxw people. And if you're curious about whose land you're on, you can go to www.whose.land to find out. And feel free to pop in the chat and let us know where you are coming from. And Braden will just give me an idea of who's in the audience based on your location. And I'll just give you a second to pop your locations in there.
Okay, so far it looks like we have Bowen Island, Hamilton, Ontario, Burnaby, Parksville, Victoria. Got someone from Squamish, Sydney, a lot of people from Sydney, actually. Switzerland. Wow, Switzerland. That's
Switzerland.
pretty far off. Yeah, there's quite a few coming in here. Sorry. I have to... Parksville, Vancouver, Quetzalcoatl, is that?
Maybe?
Yeah, maybe that sounds better. Yeah, it's
That's
quite a diverse crowd.
Awesome, thank you. Well, as far away as Switzerland and Ontario, hopefully you find something interesting and relevant to your boating life in the presentation today. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I don't know about you, but this is pretty much the main reason that I boat. The love of whales, the love of the ocean, the love of marine life, and just being out on the water is a sheer pleasure. And I want to talk to you in particular about boating with whales. Orcas, there are 3 kinds of orcas in British Columbia waters, and we have resident orcas, which are fish-eating orcas, and they primarily prey on Chinook salmon. They're broken into northern resident killer whales, which range from North Vancouver Island up to the north coast, and then we have the southern resident killer whales, which run south of that and down outside the west side of the States as well, from the Salish Sea down. We also have Biggs killer whales, which used to be called transients, or also referred to as transient killer whales, and they travel a great distance between Mexico and Alaska, and their prey are marine mammals. We also have a population of whales called the offshore killer whales, and offshore in the Pacific Ocean. Because of their location, we don't know a lot about them, but we do know they have a varied diet that includes fish and sharks. Southern resident killer whales we're going to talk about a lot today because their status is endangered. As of December 31st, there were 74 southern resident killer whales. There were 2 new babies born in September to JPOD, J57 and J58. And then just last week, we found out that there was another southern resident calf confirmed, which was really exciting news. It was only a month and a half old-ish, a month to a month and a half. and it was bored to LPOD. So that brings us up to 75 Southern resident, which is a decline from 98 in 1995, and well below their historical population, which is estimated to be somewhere around 200. There are a number of threats that are facing southern resident killer whales, and the key threats are the availability of their food source, acoustic and physical disturbance to them, and also contamination, toxins in their body. So as a result of their endangered status, the government of Canada introduced some temporary protection measures for the southern resident population that were first announced 2 years ago, almost now. Those rules were updated a bit for the 2020 boating season. The main update was expanding the region that applied to these rules. And we're expecting some 2021. They're not out yet. They will be out hopefully in April. These measures address the key threats to the southern resident killer whales that I mentioned. And most of the information that we're going to talk about around the protection measures comes from this Government of Canada brochure that you see here that you can get in our booth at the Vancouver Boat Show, Georgia Strait Alliance's booth. There's also a booth here called, the Government of Canada's booth called Boating with Marine Mammals. They have this brochure, a bunch of videos, and a whole bunch of other resources in their booth. And you can talk to team members from Parks Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and Transport Canada, all about marine mammals if you have more questions after today's talk. So these rules apply in 2021. They applied on the south coast of British Columbia from Campbell River around southern waters to the west coast of Vancouver Island, just north of Ucluelet. Now, in 2021, there is consideration being given to expand that region a little bit more by adding Barkley Sound on the west coast of Vancouver Island and Howe Sound north of Vancouver. You can see those locations in the INSAT map on the top left. And again, we will find out this coming April what exactly the region these rules apply to. Main rule we need to know as boaters is to keep 400 meters away from all killer whales. And the reason they say all killer whales rather than southern resident killer whales that these rules are designed to protect is because most people can't tell them apart. And so we just have to keep away from a good distance away from all killer whales. There are some exceptions to the 400-meter rule. There are authorized vessels that are allowed to get within 200 meters of the Biggs orcas. And in exchange for being able to view those orcas at a closer distance, the whale watchers are not authorized, are giving up the right to view southern resident killer whales at all, which is a good compromise. Interesting to note that in the United States in 2011, they doubled the approach distance from killer whales from 100 to 200 yards. And research showed that when they did that, there was a decline in PHAs, which basically comes from boat exhaust. So this is not only protecting them from physical and noise disturbance, but also this distance helps protect them from pollution from boating. Also to be aware of are the interim sanctuary zones, and these zones are no-go zones. So last year, between June and November, there were no boating or fishing within these interim sanctuary zones. And one of them was on Pender Island, the southwest corner. The other was on the east and south side of Saturna Island. And there's also a zone out on Swiftsure Bank as you head out of the Strait of Juan de Fuca towards the open ocean. These zones will likely be confirmed again for the coming year. The exceptions that they allow are, of course, if you're in a safety situation, if there's any danger that you will, and if there's a rescue needed to be done, or if you need to go into that zone to avoid danger, that is okay. You can also transit through those zones to get to local businesses or residences that you're visiting. And if you're in a human-powered boat, a kayak, canoe, paddleboard, rowboat, you can transit within 20 meters of shore in the interim sanctuary zones. There were a lot of specific fisheries closures for Chinook fisheries because that's the primary prey for southern resident killer whales. And so always, I mean, I think most of us know to check fishing regulations before we harvest any seafood. And then we know where we can and can't take fish. In addition to that, however, they're asking, this is where we get into voluntary measures. This is what they're asking us to do. They're asking us to stop fishing if we get within 1,000 meters of killer whales, and to reduce our speed to 7 knots or less if you're within 1,000 meters of killer whales. Now, those two requests may become law in the coming year. So watch for that in April and make sure that, you know, I recommend you do it regardless, but it may be law in the coming regulations this summer. They also ask when it's safe to do so to turn off your fish finders and eco sounders, and this will make it quieter in the ocean for the whales. And if you happen to get within the 400-meter approach distance, they ask that you turn your engine to neutral and allow the whales to pass. And that's if it's accidental. It's not okay to position yourself in the whale's path so that they come to you. That would be considered harassment. But if surprises do happen sometimes. And there will be enforcement, and there are a number of agencies involved in that enforcement. There will be enforcement in the air, on the water, and through radar monitoring and AIS systems. So it's a really good idea to know these rules. And if you're if you are discovered in contravention of the laws, there are penalties. It could range anywhere from a verbal or written warning to tickets and penalties, and even prosecution if the offense is egregious enough. So in addition to southern resident killer whales, of course, we share this coast with a lot of other whales and other marine mammals, and there are lots of other considerations to be aware of. So everywhere outside of the southern coastal waters of British Columbia, it is the law to keep 200 meters away from any orcas on the rest of the coast. And it's also the law to keep away 100 meters away from all other whales. And good practice is, if you see a blow, just go slow down and stay out of the way of these animals. It's illegal to disturb, interact with, touch, feed, swim with, or dive with marine mammals. Best practices: don't chase them, don't cut across their path. Like I mentioned, don't stop in front of them or approach them head on. There are situations where you're in the vicinity of whales and you need to keep moving for safety reasons or other reasons. And if you have to do that, avoid any abrupt course changes or erratic maneuvers. Approach them from the side if you have to approach them, and move parallel to them. And if you accidentally end up in their path, clear their path cautiously. And really try to avoid splitting the whales up or trapping them along shore, forcing them inwards, or trapping them between you and other vessels to alter their behavior and course. Increasing consideration on our coast is the danger of boating with large whales. There's an increasing number of humpback whales returning to our coast, and these are incredibly big animals. They're as big as a bus. Humpbacks are incredibly acrobatic, and they don't have the biosonar that orcas have, and so sometimes they're completely oblivious to boaters around them. So there have been people hurt, seriously injured on our coast from impacts with large whales, and it's just safe for the whale and safe for us to keep our distance. Jackie Hildring is also giving a talk tomorrow at 6 p.m. called Marine Mammal Viewing, Wild and Wonderful. And Jackie is with the Marine Education and Research Society, and she's a scientist. She is an educator. She's guided whale watching tours, and she's incredibly knowledgeable. And I would encourage you to take in that talk as well to learn more about boating with whales. Her organization, the Marine Education and Research Society, sells these flags, and the purpose of these flags is to warn other boaters when there are whales in the area. So you would raise the flag if you saw whales, and you drop the flag when they're no longer around, and that just gives everyone a heads up that there's whales in the vicinity. And like I said, you can get them on the Marine Education and Research Society's website. So in addition to the laws and best practices around boating in the direct vicinity of whales, there are a number of different ways we can impact whales as boaters, and the primary one is being pollution. Like I said, one of the three major threats to our southern resident orcas are toxins in their bodies. So we have a guide to green boating that can help with all kinds of information on how to reduce our impact on the marine environment. And of course, it doesn't just impact whales, it helps marine species, it helps our coastal industries as well to have a healthy marine environment. And individually, we don't have a huge impact as recreational boaters, but we tend to congregate together in sensitive habitats and seasonally and at marinas. And so, yeah, while we don't have an impact necessarily individually too much, as we congregate, we can have collectively a very large impact on the environment. So small spills really do add up. And so the very first, the best way to avoid pollution is, of course, just to be careful. Most spills happen because of human error. For example, rushing at the fuel dock because someone's waiting behind you, or you want to get out on the water and enjoy being out there. And that's when lots of spills do happen. And so, just slow down, avoid topping up your tank. Have absorbent materials handy so that you can catch your drips and prevent any drips from entering the water. Have a bucket handy with your spill supplies and gloves and any absorbent materials that you might need. Properly secure absorbent materials in your bilge to prevent any dirty bilge water from escaping. Boat maintenance, of course, is key to keep our lines and hoses and valves and seals and connections and gaskets all drip free and properly connected to avoid any leakage. Using drip pans to catch any leaks that might happen. And of course, having a fuel efficient, well-tuned engine. Something else that we can do is to plan ahead our trip and consider the tides, going with the tides, avoiding inclement weather if at all possible, just to increase our fuel efficiency as well. If we do have a spill, it is the law that we report a spill into the marine environment, and you can do that by calling the Canadian Coast Guard and by calling a 1-800-OILS 911 hotline. Another area where there's lots of potential for contamination is from our waste as boaters. So basically, if it doesn't come from the ocean, we shouldn't put it into the ocean if at all possible. Pack it in and pack it out unless you can find a place to responsibly recycle or dispose of your waste. It's a good idea before going out if you're packing a lot of stuff with you to get rid of any excess packaging so you don't have to deal with the waste later. And having a really good waste storage system on your boat is a great way to manage your waste until you can dispose of it properly. I'm wondering, Brandon, if people can tell us what kind of boats they are operating. I myself am I have a little 16-foot KNC fiberglass speedboat. I don't have a big boat right now, but I'd be curious to know. I also love to paddle anything, kayaking, canoeing, whatever I can paddle. I love getting on the water. But I'm curious, are there yachters out there, sailboaters, kayakers? That'll give me an idea when I'm going through some of these tips as well. What type of people we have here today.
All right, it looks like we've got some 30-foot sailing yachts, a lot of 30-foot yachts, some kayakers, actually quite a few kayakers, some sailboats, Kingfisher Falcon 1825, a 36 sailboat. So we have quite a few sailboats and quite a few kayakers as well. A 30-foot S2 sailboat, 43 trawler, 42-foot cruiser. So that's a good indication. 50-foot sailboat and a kayak. So seems like a mix.
Good mix. And I bet some of you have more than one boat. Boat lovers love their boats, don't we? Kayakers in particular will know about reducing excess packaging before getting out on the water for sure. But that's a great thing for everyone to do, and makes it easier for us to manage our waste on board as the trip wears on, especially if we're going on a longer trip. This is a Blackwater consideration. Some of you may have holding tanks or a marine sedimentation device or a porta potty. If at all possible, if you're going to disinfect and deodorize, avoid using products with chlorine, formaldehyde, or ammonia. The laws require us to be at least 3 miles offshore if we're going to dump a holding tank. If there's a pump out nearby, unfortunately on our coast, we don't have in some areas the access to pump out stations. And so we do have to dump our holding tanks. If that's the case, and you're asked to do it on an ebbing tide in the center of the channel in the fastest moving water while you're underway. So basically as much movement from your boat and the ocean, keeping us far away from shore as possible so that it's less localized than it would be just to dump in one spot with stagnant water. And our guide to green boating, which I've mentioned before, has a list of pump out stations in it. And we also have a listing on our website. So it's a great idea to plan ahead. You have a pretty good idea of when and where you're going to need to dump your holding tank. So just plan ahead and map out chart out where you're going to go and dump out your holding tank. You can also use onshore facilities when possible, even if there's no pump out around, to help reduce the number of times that you have to dump your holding tank. And pets, considering our pet waste as well, is a good idea to manage that and dispose of like you would at home appropriately. Boat maintenance is a really big one for releasing toxins, and we have to be really careful when maintaining our boats, and any major boat work should be done in a boatyard. Any hull scraping, sanding and stripping, and just avoiding tidal grids unless you're not going to release any toxins, and it's just something quick or easy that you can do without any pollution at all. Avoid any kind of sanding and scraping and that sort of stuff during windy days is a good idea. Using drop sheets and tarps in the boatyard, dust collection fittings, dustless sanders. Great idea to vacuum instead of sweeping. Another tip is to use a soft brush on your hull where you can reach frequently just to keep the fouling down. If you have any products you need to mix and you can't contain them, don't mix on the dock, just mix on shore, and mix potentially with a container that can catch any spills. Paint your boat is particularly an issue because anti-fouling paints are designed to be toxic, and most anti-fouling systems. And so talk to the people painting your boat for you, or your chandlery where you're getting your paint supplies, your anti-fouling paint, and find the least toxic solution that's going to be a working option for your type of vessel and your type of conditions and vessel use. Anodes are also toxic. So if you can choose a cadmium-free option, that's the least toxic alternative to use. And just so you know, it is illegal to deposit deleterious substances into fish habitat, so toxins or anything harmful to fish. And it carries a penalty of up to $1 million and 3 years in prison. I think you'd have to do something pretty incredible to get that kind of fine, but that's a maximum. There still are fines for polluting fish habitat. Just simple day-to-day cleaning and swabbing the decks can also release products into the ocean that shouldn't get there. So as we all know, it's a perfect idea to use non-toxic products, of course. And sometimes it can be confusing. Biodegradable often sounds like a really good thing, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. Biodegradable just means that a product will break down. It does not necessarily mean it breaks down into something less harmful. So non-toxic is what you want to look for, and you might want to try certain eco certifications like Eco Logo, trusting certifications. Avoid chlorine. Phosphate free is better. And decreasing the volume of chemical products that you actually use, and just using a little more elbow grease and water. And in our guide to green boating, we have a whole bunch of recipes for cleaning products that you can make from ingredients commonly found in your galley, whether it's baking soda or vinegar or lemon juice and that sort of thing. All different kinds of cleaning products for all different kinds of uses. So there's some useful products for you to consider as well. And another important consideration, of course, is to conserve water, especially when you're in islands with limited water and situations of drought. So this is something we see on our coast often, and thanks to Canada's Ocean Protection Plan, a lot of these vessels, abandoned vessels on our coast, are getting cleaned up. And they're not just a hazard to navigation and safety, but they are also a threat to the environment. There's all kinds of toxic chemicals in these boats and released into the environment when they sink. And oddly enough, until a few years ago, it was not illegal to abandon or sink a boat. That was just this weird loop that was not a law. And so that was changed. And now it's illegal to abandon a boat. It's illegal to allow a boat to become a wreck due to poor maintenance. It's illegal to sink, strand, or ground a boat on purpose. It's illegal to leave a boat in poor condition in the same 3-mile area for more than 60 days. So you can't just plop it out there and hope for the best. It has to be taken care of. And you can't leave a boat for adrift for more than 48 hours without making an attempt to secure the vessel. So given that you're preventing a boat from becoming a derelict and abandoned, what do you do at the end of the useful life of your vessel? Because a boat is a difficult thing to get rid of. So if you're going to hire someone to dispose of a vessel for you, hire a reputable company to do the job in an environmentally friendly manner. It's really unfortunate to see boats being sold for $1 just to pass our headaches onto somebody else, because 9 times out of 10, those boats end up becoming abandoned or derelict vessels. You know, sometimes people take them on that really don't know that boats are not cheap. If you've never owned a boat before, you might be surprised at how much it costs to operate and maintain a boat. So if you're passing an older boat along, be sure that who's taking it over from you has the skills and resources to be able to maintain and operate that boat. If you're going to recycle a boat yourself, it's a really good idea to contain all the waste when dismantling it, and of course disposing of any hazardous materials and waste in a safe and appropriate manner. Recycle, repurpose, sell components, reuse anything that you can, and remaining materials unfortunately have to go to the landfill. But if we can minimize the amount of the boat that actually ends up in the landfill, that's ideal. So sensitive habitat is another thing to consider when we're boating. If we're in shallow water, our wake can really disturb habitat. So it's a really good idea to slow down, both for safety reasons, but also for environmental reasons when we're in shallow water. And to avoid harm to shellfish beds, kelp and eelgrass beds, be extra careful around those sensitive habitats. Watch for ground nesting birds. These are oyster catchers with nest on the beach, and you can see how camouflaged their eggs are. And of course, we need to consider our pets as well. Dogs can cause a lot of damage, not necessarily on purpose, but yeah, they can be harmful to sensitive habitat as well. So we need to consider our pets. And another important consideration is to consider the communities that we're going into. For example, if we're going into First Nations communities or regions with culture that we might disturb, and to respect First Nations communities' rights and titles. For example, last summer with COVID, there were a number of First Nations communities that did not want visitors during COVID, and that's understandable. And so it's a really good idea to do some research before we go out on a trip to find out what kind of things we're going to encounter and any special considerations that we need to be prepared for before we go. We can also spread aquatic invasive species as boaters. There are aquatic invasive species regulations came in several years ago, and it's now, there are prohibited species which we are not allowed to possess, transport, release, or introduce into new areas. British Columbia is working really hard to prevent the spread of quagga and zebra mussels into our province, for example. They can be devastating if they enter a freshwater environment where they don't belong. If you see a boat inspection station on the side of the road, if you're trailering a boat, it is the law that you pull over and be inspected. They will have dogs sniffing your boat, and they may do a clean of your boat to remove any potential invasive species. If they find any, in particular quagga and zebra mussels, they will clean your boat. The best way to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species is just to clean, drain, and dry. Everywhere that there's water on the outside and inside, clean it, drain it, dry it out, whether that's your boat, anywhere water can gather, your trailer, your equipment, your boots anywhere that you can transport. It's really important not to contaminate new water when you relocate your vessel. So in addition with boaters to help provide the resources to not damage the oceans that we love and the freshwater systems that we love, we also work with marinas and other boating facilities on environmental best practices. So we have in 2008, we were approached by Environment Canada to bring a marina eco-certification program to British Columbia. And we certified our first facility in 2008, and we are now up to 33 facilities certified. We have another 25 enrolled to be certified for a total of 62. So we work with them on everything from water and energy conservation to the materials that their docks are constructed from, to emergency preparedness, fueling procedures, waste and toxic waste and garbage recycling and so on, boatyard practices. And we really appreciate the effort that these facilities are putting in to improve upon their best practices as well. So in this map, you'll see a little what numbers represent is our anchor rating system, which ranges from 1 anchor, the minimum certification level, to a top rating of 5 anchors. And we see our marinas over time increase their anchor rating, which shows a real commitment to continual improvement, and we help them with that. And we're heavily concentrated around the Georgia Strait region, but we have certified our first facility inland and at the Kelowna Yacht Club now, and we have a Tofino Marina enrolled to be certified now, so we're open to all of British Columbia. So if you don't see that Clean Marine BC flag flying at your marina, you can talk to me and find out how to have your marina or boatyard, yacht club, harbor authority, or fuel dock join our program. And before we move on into questions, I'd just like to thank some of our sponsors and funders. Environment and Climate Change Canada is funding our Clean Marine BC Marina certification work. The province of BC gives us funding for our green boating work, and our sponsors CTO and Dolphin Insurance, and we have some advertising money working with Boating BC on the abandoned and derelict vessel issue. And those 3 organizations are actually at the Vancouver Boat Show here this week, so I encourage you to go visit them at their booths as well. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the many donors that support our organizations with memberships and charitable donations. So we're here at the show until Saturday, so come visit us at our booth, get your guide to green boating there. There's some videos that you can watch. The Southern Resident Killer Whale 2020 brochure is there. You can join me there and sign up for our email list so that you can get notified when the new protection measures come out for Southern Resident Killer Whales for 2021 in April. Or any other questions you might have around green boating that I can help you with, I'll be happy to. My email address is there, our website, and of course, we're on a number of social media channels, and we'll be happy to talk to you more. So maybe Brandon, is there any questions for me?
Yeah, and if anyone has any questions at home, be sure to drop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We can ask Michelle while she's here. First up from Jeff at home. Sorry I joined late. Are there rules specific to sailing vessels not running engines?
I'm assuming he's talking about the protection measures for Southern Resident Killer Whales, and I'm not aware of any change in the regulations for any type of vessel other than human powered. So sail would qualify as any other boat to keep the 400-meter distance, if at all possible. They're of course going to take maneuverability into consideration, and looking at your actions and your intentions if they think you're in an infraction.
All right, next up, is there a plan in place to provide more pump stations in the future?
That's a really good question. We're very jealous of Washington State because they have government funding to not just install pump out stations, but to operate and staff them and maintain them. And we do not have that here. So the pump out stations are really up to the marinas and harbor authorities and yacht clubs to install. So I'm not aware of any plans for funding to help with that. But we are slowly seeing the number of pump outs increase naturally. But yeah, I'm not aware of any rules coming down that they're required or any funding, unfortunately. And we can't get away from that 3-mile loophole of being allowed to dump offshore if we don't have the infrastructure on the coast. So we do occasionally make submissions to various levels of government to try and get funding for that, but we haven't been successful yet.
All right, next up from Ted. What is your estimate of the percentage of boaters that violate the 3-mile pump out rule? Do you think this has a strong impact on the whale ecosystem health?
Another good question. I don't have any hard statistics on that, and I have not actually heard a percentage of boaters that do. I would think I mean, it would have to happen a lot more on the north coast. There would be regional variances because there tends to be way more pump outs down south, further down south, and as you get further north, there's further distances between the pump outs. But I'm sorry, I don't have specific numbers of violations of that.
All right. Next up is more of a comment from Kim watching. I have a composting toilet and would totally recommend it. Way easier to dump, not in the ocean.
Thank you, Kim. The only consideration with composting toilets is that the urine is still not supposed to be dumped overboard, and that happens sometimes with some systems on some boats. So something to consider if installing one, but they are good, yeah.
All right, and that seems to be all we have at the moment. If anyone else has any more questions, be sure to drop them in the box there. But your contact information is also on the screen, so if people want to jot that down as well, they have a few moments here. Michelle, is there any more frequently asked questions you get with this presentation?
I think we pretty much covered it. I cover a lot of material, and I really appreciate everyone coming to sit through it as we're starting to get nicer weather, at least where I am. And if you do have any more questions, like I say, pop over to our Georgia Strait Alliance booth or download our guide to green boating, and hopefully that will help you.
All right, perfect. I think that might be it for us then today. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up here?
No, just thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the boat show.
Right, perfect. Just one moment. Perfect. Yeah, I think that is all of our questions here. So I think we will call it a wrap there. But I want to thank you again, Michelle, for your time here today. I want to thank everybody at home as well for watching. And I want to thank you for all of your feedback. We're interested in more feedback either on this seminar or if you have any ideas for topics you'd like to see us cover in the future. So you can click on the Evaluate tab located above the seminar description to complete the form. And after the show, attendees will also be receiving a post-show survey, so be sure to fill that out. You'll also want to check out all the other features we have here at VIBS Virtual. If you have any questions, check out the info booth for some answers. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day here at the Boat Show. Once again, thanks, Michelle, and take care.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you everyone for coming. Have a good day.
Oh yeah, the season starts.